if they say it's like fucking, best player of all time, CJ McCollum, I'm gonna have a fucking argument about that. But mostly, if you
Welcome to Bogues, another edition of the basketball series. I'm on the road, obviously, as I have a nice background here. Pros at home. We've got Trent coming live from studio. Just wrapped up with the Indiana-New York series. We'll get into that a little bit later, and we'll obviously wrap up OKC and Mini, so stay tuned for that. Let's just get into some news real quick before we do get into that, Pro, and we'll also try to preview the earliest preview available for the NBA Finals probably out there, so we'll see how we go. But getting into some news, Pro. Hate to lead with somber note, but Zion Williams again in some hot water. This is all alleged, of course, and I don't think we should judge on what's going on until there's an actual verdict, because there is, unfortunately, both two sides to the story with these kinds of things, and we've seen it go both ways. But accused of some pretty startling things, most notably rape is what's come up in the court documents or the filings from a female he spent time with. Numerous counts of that, along with physical violence, domestic violence, that kind of stuff. Pro, I mean, he's a guy that his talent is out of this world. We've spoken about that at numerous lengths, but just couldn't get his body right, can't get things right and flowing in a nice way. Now you've got this off court and off season. I mean, is this enough for New Orleans, to just say, hey, we're done?
I think in most cases in the NBA, they just wait for the investigative part to be finished with it. He has had a lot around him, with the weight, with the, just sort of the things around him haven't been great, especially with the injury and the weight and all that. With this thing, they're going to wait for the whole investigative process to be done. But the one thing, look, I'm never going to speak on something that I don't really know much about, and especially there's not a lot of information about it. But things like this have been circling him the last 6 months or so. You've heard some things like on social media, girls sort of like saying things about, kids or not treating them right, but nothing like this. But I hope it's not a smoke, but it's fire situation. But again, until information comes in, I don't think anybody could really make a move on this. But I think they'll act semi-swiftly. If it's just some arguing and things like that, and not taking care of what he needs to take care of, it's one thing. But if there's physical assault, kidnapping, rape, then that's a completely different thing. But I think they're going to have to wait till the investigative part's over.
Yeah, it's pretty startling stuff, just accusations alone. But we obviously don't want to get too much into it, let it play out, and we'll see what happens. But regardless, I think for New Orleans, you have to be sitting there scratching your head, just saying, man, like, we just can't get anything positive flowing in a flow state for us on and off the court. It just seems to go from bad to worse for them. So we'll watch that space and see how it goes. The Denver Nuggets probe, I don't know if this is too surprising, but they've cleaned house on all their assistants, who I assume were all there under Mike Malone. They will not retain Ryan Saunders, Popeye Jones, Charles Klask, and Stephen Graham as assistants, Pro. No real surprise there, but interesting. He's gone almost full house. I mean, that's pretty much most of your front of bench, I believe. I think one of those guys is behind the bench, but and
a bunch of them are behind.
Yeah, and Adelman obviously has the right to go. And in this business, for those not familiar, a lot of times organizations will let most coaches pick their bench completely. Most times organizations might say, hey, there's one guy we want you to keep or two guys we want you to keep. These are your two keeps. You can hire the rest. Some big name coaches, that have been around for a long time, that are on big salaries, usually want all their own guys for obvious reasons. But there is a strategic play in hiring assistants and having guys that you think have your back, especially in the NBA, Pro, as we know, but not too surprising that 4 are gone from Denver.
Well, without a GM, usually the new age NBA, a lot of the GMs and front offices are controlling a lot of the hires that go more than most. That the controlling the hiring, how teams, how coaches could hire the staff, especially with a new coach. It could go a couple of ways. Usually when a head coach gets fired, they right away they gong his number one guy. No, they didn't do it this way, just because they left everybody alone until the end of the playoffs. But it could be a allegiance thing to Mike Malone, and then they're like, look, we just want to clean house of that. It could be a valuation, from owners, because obviously this comes from ownership, and being that they have no front office really as far as the head of the snake. The one weird thing to me about that, Bogues, if you listen to that series against Oklahoma City, that Stephen Graham got a lot of credit for Aaron Gordon's shot, and in the development and the work that he's done. I'm surprised at that one. Look, that this can go any way you want it to go as far as letting assistants go, but I mean, he got a lot of airtime as far as the work that he did with Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon did improve in shooting this year tremendously. So that I was a little bit shocked at that one. But this is a sort of semi-normal thing that happens in the NBA. Although when you do hire the interim coach, a lot of times he keeps about half the guys. Although there's about 50 coaches in the NBA these days, so he probably kept more than half. But yeah it's probably it came down from ownership. I don't think it came from Adelman, if I had to guess. So they probably just want to let everybody go that was a Mike Malone guy, if that's the case. But that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I also would have to. You'd have to think that Adelman will want a couple of his own guys too, as well, right? Like that he's probably built relationships over the last 5 or 6 years or 10 years of being in the league. So it will be interesting to see where those hires go. Cooper Flagg, did you see his NIL number by any chance?
His what? His
NIL number that's been rumored floating around.
I've heard the number from an inside source that NIL number was in the neighborhood of 13 to 15 million. Well, that's what I heard.
It's whether this is true or not. It's been posted online by numerous people. $28 million in NIL money, in NIL money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
no.
You just look at this and you just got to think like, how this can't last. Like it just. How this is sustainable. Now that's he's the number one pick and the best player in the nation and all that kind of stuff. 28 million, like even some role players now from Australia and whatnot are getting $1 to $2 million a season. You just scratch your head and you just think like this can't be sustainable, especially when these schools have to with Title IX. For those not familiar with that, they have to have a certain number of the same number of women's programs as they do men. So a lot of times. Schools won't, when I was at Utah, there was no men's soccer program. There was only a women's soccer program. There was no men's volleyball team, only a women's volleyball team to even out the fact that there's, American football, for example, only has a male program, right? So I just don't know how it's going to sustain long term. And where, it is the wild, wild west at the moment. Another footnote I heard, Pro, do you know what agents are charging for NIL contracts?
20%. Absolutely
fucking bonkers. So... Mm-hmm. Agents generally for a professional playing contract, the agent fee is anywhere between 2 to 5%. It's negotiable, so you can negotiate anywhere within that range. Most agents are 3 to 4 these days. That's strictly contract, and then the agency will have a marketing arm. That's usually 20%, right? For a marketing arm, that's negotiable too. You can get it down to 10, maybe 15 in some cases, but usually 20 is the right number, right? So what agents are arguing is, what is NIL Pro? It is it is money for marketing and by name, image, likeness, NIL. So agents are arguing this is not a playing contract when it really is. It's a playing contract effectively, because if you can't play basketball, the NIL means fuck all, right? So agents have manipulated this now to say, well, we're charging 20%, which is just absolute highway robbery. And I think that's going to slowly dwindle down. I know some agents that are already going down towards 5 to try and even out the market a little bit, and you feel for some of these kids coming from poor areas. The dads a lot of times are negotiating these deals with agents, so they don't know any better. They get locked into 20% for 2 or 3 years till they smell the roses and go, hang on a second, imagine 20% on 28 million for Cooper Flagg, $5.6 million. Thank you very much. Like, we're not doing a whole lot.
Yeah. A lot of these kids I've heard, Bogues, are telling these agents to fuck off once they get the deal in place. Look, with the NIL, you've got the collective of the school that don't supposed to be connected to the program, that they give them the NIL package, right? Now they've got also in the Power 4, they've got revenue sharing, which is $22 million for each athletic program. Has got to come up with $22 million. it comes out to about 80% goes to football. And it's not even revenue sharing. Like I heard revenue sharing. I'm like, okay, 22 million. And then it splits to like, I don't know, 400 athletes or whatever you get in your athletic program, boys and men's and women. And then it just goes equally. It doesn't do that. It's 22 million. About 80% goes to football. About 10% goes to basketball. And then everybody else sort of splits up and gets a little bit of money here and there. With the agencies, the first few years of NIL, there was no charge. Like these agents were just trying to get these kids in the door to get relationships with them to do their contract when they became pros. Now the 20% deals come in. I mean, I've known people that were trying to represent G League guys, can't get it, and then they were early to the table with this NIL stuff, and now they're making 7 figures in NIL deals. Like with the NBA, you usually don't charge them on their first deal at all. And then the second deal is that when you charge them, 4% and whatnot. Now it takes you 5 or 6 years to collect anything from a player for the most part. Now they're collecting when they're 17, 18, 19 years old, and they're collecting. I was talking to somebody today where an agent was saying like 3 of their clients said no to $3 million. Like $3 million in NIL money they said no to, and they collected more from the team. So imagine as a regular agent, you represent, say, Cooper Flagg. You get his marketing money, but you're not getting anything on his first deal. And you have to pay for his pre-draft training and all this stuff. That's money out of pocket, travel, all that. And then you don't get money really until that second deal. Now you're getting decent players that are getting $3 million. You're collecting $600,000 on that NIL deal for multiple years. Now you're seeing draft guys, Bogues, they're not coming out early anymore. First 10, first 12, first 14 picks, a lot of early entry draft guys. Now these guys are saying, wait a minute, I'll stay at Colorado and get $2.5 million to average 7-7. Why the fuck should I go in the NBA and be a two-way guy? I can collect my money here and then just do it a couple more years and then do my NBA stuff, unless I'm going to be a high lottery pick. So it's the Wild Wild West. It's if you ever saw Star Wars, that Star Wars Cantina bar, that's exactly what fucking college basketball is. It's a complete and utter fucking shit show. So that's what I think.
Yeah, I just think it's, like I said, it's not. I'd be surprised if in 5 to 10 years it's still operating the way it is. I think now it's fresh. There's no real rules or protocols or mandates put in place to protect anything. It's just whoever's got the big barrel of money, they throw it and they get the best players. But I just don't know if that's sustainable. I don't know if it's the best thing. And shit, if you're Cooper Flagg, stay in college for 4 years, $28 million a year,
And they're talking about salary cap too, Bogues. So I don't even know how that number could come about. But again, NIL and the revenue sharing are 2 completely different things. So I guess they could find a way to get the money. A high major assistant coach that I know very well said, Mike, the only difference with NIL and what used to happen 8 years ago is the bag of money is going over the table instead of under the table. So
fair point. Fair point. And taxes probably need to be paid, right?
2 things, Bogues, that they're going to get in trouble with. Owing agents money, and the agents are going to go after the kid. And the second thing is taxes. I guarantee you 70% of these kids aren't paying taxes.
No way. No way. They wouldn't even have any idea about it. No chance. But eventually the IRS will come knocking. P32 AAU. You heard of P32 Pro?
Mm-mm.
One of the bigger AAU circuits. It's an AAU circuit in the US. Mm-hmm. One of the bigger ones. They're a multi-city AAU tournament. Mm-hmm. Here's something to look at. Have you heard about fees for these places just for entry?
Bogues, so
outside of, I know there's team fees that teams have to pay to enter.
Not that.
Just entry.
I've been to a few of these things. It's average, Bogues, of these things cost $40 to $50 a day, $80 to $100 for the weekend. I was in Irvine, California, doing pre-draft training. I went to see Dan Dickau's team coach in I forgot where I was. I was in Southern California. Right before you get in, Bogues, they charge you $30 to park. They charge you $40 at the door, $80 for the weekend, on top of the other stuff and then you get hit with everything else. At the
bottle of water is $15.
Yeah, water's $15. You get hit with, you want all the films for your kid that played 4 minutes in 3 days. All right, that's going to be $40 a game. Then some moron wants to charge you $600 to make like a 45-second highlight tape with like, Drake bumping in the background for $600 for 45 seconds. Like all these people keep hitting you. It is unbelievable. I don't know about this P32 because it's all these circuits, Bogues. Bogues, these guys used to make for AU tournaments. You might like back in the day when I started. Somebody ran a decent sized AU tournament, they might make 15, 20 grand. These guys, Bogues, for a weekend are making $200,000 to $300,000 a weekend. Yeah.
So this one, someone posted it online. It's the adult day is $40 for the weekend. It's $90. 6 to 12 years old, $25. But pro, if you're 5 and under and you can barely mutter a word, you get in for free. But someone equated that with, it's $40 for an adult day pass. You can go to a Grizzlies game or a smaller market upper bowl game in the NBA for around about that price, if not less. So that just gives you a feel for what you're paying, and the parents are the ones affected by this because it costs a fuckload as well to put money together to pay for the flights, hotels, buses, food. Most AAU teams charge a fee to enter to have the privilege of playing for that team. You're a couple of grand out already. Then you got to fly there as a parent. If you're doing it tough, man, the last thing you want is a kick in the nuts of getting in to watch your kid play. It's just ridiculous. And it's just become. You and I both shared the Richard Jefferson rant on social media. I saw you shared it as well on your page, where he was just talking about AAU's the exact reason why, international players are where they are in the NBA and internationally is because there's just too many games. And when it's making money like this, you can see why they're pushing more games,
Folks, USA basketball needs to step up. And they like, because in all the other countries, I don't know about Australia, but I know in Europe, like FIBA Italy, FIBA Spain, whatever, they control everything. They control how many games you play. They control your schedule. They control everything that you do from age 10 to pro, and the rules, everything. And the problem with basketball in the United States, look, we could talk for 5 hours of why AU's fucked up, but what happens is, like, it's the wild, wild west. This needs to be regulated as far as, look, from the player to the people who run events, to the coaches that coach it, people who run the events. Like, as an event, you can only charge so much money. You can only play so many games in a weekend. You can only play so many weekends in a year. Like, it needs to be regulated because that's completely ridiculous. And that's the problem, is these parents think they need this, and they really don't, to be honest. And they do it since 10 years old. And it's not just basketball. I've got my best friend does this for two kids on the baseball front, and it's almost the same thing. So in AU in the United States, folks, you pay about $1,500 a season, and the season's about 3 months long, and you play 2 to 3 seasons a year, and that's just uniform practices and to get in the events. Then you got to pay, like you said, travel, hotel, food, car, whatever, and renting.
Not working if you're a parent, taking time off from work, like
crazy.
Like, it's tough.
Crazy.
And for parents out there, like, what's the right number? In my opinion, I don't know what your opinion is. I think if your kid is getting one elite game a week, meaning in Australia that would be rep basketball, so on a Friday night, and then they're playing maybe one other game, maybe 2 with domestic, which is a bit lower pro. It's kind of your local. That's more than enough. And then those other five days are basically training. When I was younger, back in my day, but when I was younger, there was no such thing as domestic or rep games for kids on weekdays in Australia, right? So all your games were Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That was when you played. You played Friday night. If you, on Saturday you might play, and you might hang around if like one of the older teams is short 1 or 2 players, you join them and you play, and that was it. The rest was all about training. We trained Sunday mornings too, and you grew so much more as a player because if you're only a 10, like you said, Jimmy's a 4-minute player or a 10-minute player. It's great you're playing 6 games a week, but like, is Jimmy really getting better? Like, no. Okay, maybe the star player benefits from that the most, but I'd still argue those practices, individual development, conditioning, movement patterns, certain scenarios in training, you can't beat that. Games are great, but that'll all come later in your career, right? And now we're just seeing, I think it's the FOMO effect, pro, where parents think, shit, this kid's doing the travel circuit, my kid's going to be behind. It's not. No, if your kid stays home, you've got a good basketball coach, a good program, good training program, they'll be ahead by the time they come back from their AAU tour or their Australia-wide tour, America-wide tour, in my opinion. I don't know where you sit on that, but you just don't need 6, 7, 8 games a weekend. Like, it's ridiculous.
No. What I think, Bogues, is it should be a national rule where you can't play back-to-back weekends. So you can only play 2 weekends a month. So I don't care what you do in those weekends. If I'm a parent, right? If I'm advising a parent, I'll instead of throwing all that money into AAU when they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, even 15, what I would do is I'll get a shooting coach that knows what he's doing. I'll get a basketball trainer that knows what he's doing and ask around and do some research. I'd get a strength and conditioning coach for my kid. And then, like, I'd put that money into those guys. And you don't need to spend a ton on those people either. There's a ton of people that could do it for an affordable rate. So this way they're getting shooting, they're getting a training. You don't need a trainer every day, but you work with whatever to work on their skills. Work on a strength and conditioning program, with some type of a trainer, and then obviously find a team that practices. But I would definitely, Bogues, they gotta do something where you can't play back-to-back weekends. There's no reason for it. So, I just don't, it's better for the kids because a lot of NBA strength coaches and the people who like the trainers and things that I talk to, these players are coming in pre-draft and getting tested. And because of all the games they play, 20 years ago when you coming up, in this country, you probably played 40 games a year for AAU, and then you played 20 or 30 games for your high school and college or whatever. Now these kids are playing about 100, 110 games a year. And it's just extra wear and tear, and they're not taking care of their bodies. Their diets are terrible, and then they're playing all these games. So their joints and things, they're aging 10 years. And I think that's a big reason for a lot of these injuries when they get into the NBA because of the overuse now from 12 to 17. And then they do everything else. They're doing the workouts, the trainers, and all this other stuff. So it is an interesting deal, but all those fees are just ridiculous because a lot of people can't afford it. And and they think that it's really helping when they should take that money if they have it and invest it in actual development of their kids. And it's not just it's got to be selective things. It's a crazy deal. And everybody thinks Johnny or Jennifer is going to go to UCLA. As much as I do, 95% of those people are going to fall short of doing anything close to that. And people just get taken advantage of.
Yeah, when money's involved, it definitely there's an incentive for these tournaments to just pump out as many games, as many weekends as they can, and make more money. I don't think there's an incentive for the kids too much, So,
yeah,
interesting. Anyway, last one, a funny one from the WNBA Pro. Have you been following these Angel Reese bettors that popped up on your feed?
No, I haven't.
So there's some, obviously Trent seen it because he's giggling, but there's a group of guys that have bet Angel Reese to miss her first shot. They're currently on.
I saw that.
They're currently on day 6. They've won all 6 days. They've bet on her to miss her first shot. I mean, it's a pretty good bet. I think she's shooting 27 or 30% from the field. But it's quite funny because they're posting a video with it and they're just having a laugh with it. But it's now grown into its own little thing online that everyone. It's kind of like that blackjack dude from a year or two ago that kept doubling up his winnings and posting it online. It's like this group of delinquents are just taking the absolute piss, but she's missing her first shot. So maybe someone should let her know, try to get a layup for Game 7, so she can get those kids to disappear off the Instagram.
I still love my favorite Angel Reese deal is when she was on Wheaties and everybody filmed themselves getting the Wheaties off the shelf and just kept on trying to shoot it into the bucket and into their grocery bale and it just keep missing. I mean, I don't know. I've never dealt with her, but she seems like she's just very unlikable in the sense that she just brings this stuff a lot on herself. But I mean, the fact that she can't make a layup, and I don't watch her, so I don't know if this is just selective stuff. But I mean, every clip that you see of her playing, it's 8 missed layups in a game, 4 feet, 3 feet. I don't know, man, but yeah,
it's just a funny one. And look. I agree with you. It's overdone online, but I think if you're a league that wants to be spoken about with the NBA and whatnot, this is the other side of it. You're going to have people taking the piss out of you, and it's actually somewhat a good thing that people are actually, taking the piss and having a laugh and memeing you means you want to get to that level of NBA players cop that every day. There's someone getting memed or someone blowing up. So the WNBA can't be immune if it wants to be up there with the big leagues. So interesting. All right, let's get into OKC and Mini. This was a shit series. Let's just put it bluntly. Pro, was this OKC being great, Mini being horrible, or was there a middle ground there with the whitewash of this series?
I mean, I think Oklahoma City from top to bottom is a dominant team, and I think they're all about business, and every way you look, they've got something with it. They've got an elite scorer, an elite player. They've got inside presence. They've got physicality. They've got defenders in the wings. They got role players that can shoot. Minnesota, look, and we'll talk about it with the Knicks series too. When Minnesota locks in to being physical, up on the ball, and just straight line driving and not settling, they're a decent team and they could compete with Oklahoma City. I don't think even if they hit it on all cylinders that they would even been close here, but they could have made it a lot closer than it was. But Oklahoma City is just a dominating team from top to bottom, and I just think it's more like that, Bogues. But Minnesota is a good team. They could compete in the West. They just don't have enough at the end of the day. You need two superstar scorers, in my opinion, to really get through a division. And I don't think they have it they have Edwards, but they don't really have it consistently with anyone else. And then the other guy, Randall, just not enough. I just don't think you have enough offense, folks. They got shot makers, and they got Rudy that can protect the rim, and they play hard and they do all this. They're very well coached, but I just don't think they have enough. And Oklahoma City is just spread out. I mean, with what they have, and I think that it's really. I mean, you gotta play perfect basketball to beat those guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think that OKC, just when they turned it on, especially at the defensive end, you look at the cumulative stats from the series of 5 games. 117 to 110. Now, that was a bit distorted because there were some blowouts. Minnesota out-rebounded them. Minnesota were only 2 assists per game behind. The big stat for me was turnovers. So 17.4 turnovers to 13.6 in Oklahoma's favor. That's 4 more turnovers a game, usually resulting in fast break layups, and 11 steals to 5.6. So 11 steals for OKC. Everything else was pretty even. OKC shot it at 48%, Minnesota at 45%, threes were 37 each, free throw percentage 82 to 76. It just goes to show how important looking after the ball. You average 17 turnovers, you're not going to win much in the NBA. And I think, Minnesota had a decent season. I think they fell into some luck. I don't think the Lakers were they deserved of that high seed? Were they a high seed team? If you look back at NBA history where they were placed, I think they had a nice little run in the regular season, but I never, you didn't think they were going to do deep damage in the playoffs. I had them picked against Minnesota at least, but Minnesota beat them fairly easily. The Golden State thing, Steph goes down, series pretty much over, just not enough offense from Golden State. They kind of stumbled into a conference finals, and OKC was just way too good, and they're so well balanced. They're coming together. They've been through all kinds of battles. The Caruso acquisition is still, I know they lost Giddey, but they had to make that deal, get a role-playing guard that doesn't need big minutes. He was huge for them the last 2 series, especially defensively. SGA 31 a night, getting the free throw line 10 times a night with 8 assists. Jalen Williams at 22 a night, Chet with 18, and then the rest is very, very balanced. And Minnesota, 23 a night from Edwards, 17 from Randall, 13 McDaniels, 12 Nickel Alexander-Walker. Miller came into the rotation for 1 game and had 11 for him, and then DiVincenzo, who kind of sputtered after the second half of the season there in Minnesota, didn't play that well. But, Julius Randle has a player option pro. Do you see him opting out to test the open market? Do you see him opting out with an extension with Minnesota? Or do you just seeing him opting in for that money because he won't get it on the open market?
Well, because I don't think a lot of these players now are staying for that extra year. I think in most cases they're going to try to even get a smaller amount of money,
longer,
by year, just to get more money. I don't see him doing that, but I don't know. To me, there's not a lot of teams he fits great in. I don't think that Minnesota can make great moves to get another guy. So they might be stuck in extending him and saying, look, if we let him go, he opts out and we let him go, I'm not sure on the salary number. Even if he does that,
they're second this season, pro. They're second this season.
Yeah, they're
$204 million.
Yeah,
and they're 187.
Yeah, they're 192, like something like that, right?
187 next season, and then they drop to 124. So you're right. Yeah. There's not a lot they can do. They don't have a lot of flexibility. The Rudy Gobert trade was the one that really busted their cap flexibility up. But I just wonder what he does, because at times he doesn't. He's kind of like that everywhere. At times he kind of doesn't look happy anywhere, and then at times he looks very happy. So it's kind of.
He's actually a really good guy.
Yeah. I had him at Lakers. Awesome.
People around him in Dallas, like, they love him because he's a Dallas kid. He actually went to school literally like a mile from my house at Prestonwood Academy. And the thing about it, Bogues, though, that it just is what it is, and this is how you get judged. Like, he's a really good player because he's tough. He could put the ball on the floor. He could score. But when it really comes down to important games, it seems to me that something just sort of doesn't get all the way to the top floor. And it's hard for him to really step up in those types of games. There are games he could score 35, no doubt about it. But like in really tough playoff situations, I don't know how many he's been in his career, but like that's where I think he struggles. But they need offense, and he sort of, at the end of the year in playoffs, he looked really good at times, but I just think he's very limited in his decision making. And I think in this game, in today's day and age in the game, you need to be a quick decision maker to be an elite player on most cases. And I think, look, they've got great pieces with Edwards and him, and McDaniels plays well, and Gobert in his defense, and Naz Reid off the bench, and Alexander Walker, DiVincenzo, Grant Conley, leadership, all that. But I just don't think they have enough. And now, look, Oklahoma City's going to be here for they're like Chernobyl, right? They're gonna stake their claim in the NBA soil for about 300 more years. With all the draft picks they got, the young players, they could thump anybody in any deal. So like if you're any deal and you could give 9 draft picks, they can give 15. They've got players, they got draft picks, they got all that. So with Minnesota, yeah, like they can compete a little bit. Like they could sort of get to a conference final, but don't forget, OKC's just staring at you. Houston, you don't know what's going to happen there. LA, they're probably going to make a move for somebody, so that you got to worry about them. The Clippers being healthy. Like, there's a bunch of teams, the Dallas Mavericks, with what they're doing with Cooper Flagg, and maybe if Kyrie gets back or whatever. I just don't see the upside in Minnesota where I see upside in 4 or 5 of these teams in the West to leapfrog
San Antonio.
Yeah, San Antonio, like that. We haven't even talked about that. So there's a lot of tough decisions that they're going to have to make to try to make their team better. And they don't really have a lot of assets outside of a couple of players that they can move that, Gobert's contract's tough to move. Conley's, that doesn't have a lot of value. McDaniels is good, but how much can you get for him? Plus, he helps you a lot on the defensive side. Straight line driver, can make shots. You could look. Tim Conley's one of the better GMs in the league. He built up the Denver, so maybe they can make a couple of moves. But yeah, Bogues, I think they're stuck. And I think so. Back to everybody's point with Randall. I'm thinking he's going to probably opt out, and they're going to probably sign him to like a cap-friendly 3-year deal, 3+1 or something like that, maybe a 2-year deal. But they'll probably stick with him, and they want to sign him for a couple more years, just because I don't think they can go anywhere else without him.
Yeah, you can't. He walks. You got to acquire that in the cap then, and then it'll hurt you. So, yeah, I agree. It just will be interesting to see how they're railroaded into rolling it back, and that rollback, they could be a plane or below next season with those teams. San Antonio is healthy with Fox and Wemby, and they get healthy. They could also roar into 6, 7, 8. Sacramento's still floating around. Who knows what happens there? Denver, if they retool a little bit on their bench, they could be back up to the top. The Clippers, the Lakers, even Golden State. They're still going to float around that region. So there's a lot of good teams. The West is just so tough. So that form will continue. All right, New York versus Indy. Game just finished. One of the most horrific third quarters I've seen in a long time from the New York Knicks. Just absolutely pissed all over their foot. It was, just turnovers, clunky offense. Just their offense, just the whole game just looked like. You look at one end in Indiana, it's just flowing, it's smooth, it gets from side to side, it gets through hands. You get to New York's half-court offense, and it's throw it to Brunson, dribble, swing to someone, contested three, Cat putting his head down, trying to get to the line. Like, it was just ugly, ugly Eastern Conference from the 2000s, 90s type basketball that they just couldn't get it done. And Indiana, in my opinion, they played really well in the series for the most part. I don't think they played exceptionally well today. I think they turned their defense on in the third quarter. They got turnovers. The game was almost over after that. But this was a series that, you take back game one, that New York shouldn't have lost. This would go 7. But looking at the stats, it's quite interesting. The cumulatives for this series was 116.8 to 115 for the Pacers. So they 1.8 difference over the course of the series. The Knicks out-rebounded them by 5 a night. Steals were relatively even. Blocks were relatively even. Field goal percentage relatively even. The three ball for the Knicks, 33% to 39% for Indiana, and free throws were even. Once again, assist to turnover ratios. Turnovers for the Knicks, 15 turnovers to 12, and assists 25 for Indiana to 19. So Indiana have more assists, 25 to 12 assist to turnover ratio, 2-1, very healthy number. The Knicks, 19 assists. They turn it over almost once for every assist they get. And you could see that, just very, very clunky, relying on Brunson to create everything, not a lot of ball movement. Thibs finally went deep into his arsenal and tried to play some guys who hadn't played for 2 months pro, so we all know how that goes. They can come with energy for a game or two. They fizzle out as the games get more grindy and there's more games. But I think Carlisle, no disrespect to Thibs, but I think Carlisle won this battle from a coaching standpoint by far, heavily outcoached. Heavily adjustment, outcoached, even just small little nuances that Indiana were doing in the flow of a game. I noticed certain things like they'd run a pick and roll and, a certain guy would be the tag guy defensively for New York. The next possession, they'd realize that. They'd clear that corner out, and then New York didn't know how to recover. Like, they were doing all kinds of weird shit. Not weird, but just smart stuff to keep New York on their toes defensively, and they'd get easy baskets from it. Plus, you factor in the amount of leak-outs that Indiana get, and we spoke about it 2 or 3 podcasts ago, the past 2 series with Indiana. They're elite at giving up a shot or a basket, make or miss, and they're already at the other end. Even in fourth quarters, Pro, which you don't usually see with those kind of teams with a lead. They're up 10, 5 minutes left in the fourth. Most teams would kind of start to play the clock. Carlisle's really instilled in them that, no, if we can get an open layup or a contested easy layup, kick it ahead. And you just saw leak out after leak out towards the end of fourth quarters in every series they've been in. And you're scratching your head like, how do you allow this? How do you not get back if you're New York? That's the number one thing on the scouting report if I'm scouting Indiana is high pace of play, and they want to run it down your throat every single possession, make or miss. If you dunk on someone, there's no yelling, pounding your chest, get your ass back, and every team's giving it up. So that tells me just how much emphasis they put on pace in Indiana, but much credit to them, and they're in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, look, I think everybody knows how to win in the NBA in the sense of like, how do you need to play? I think you're on both ends of the floor, both sidelines. You scout it. Look, this is how we got to play to win. And both teams had success in the playoffs in this series about the way they need to play. And if you play a certain way, you're going to have a good success rate to try to win game and going to win games. And Indiana found themselves late in the season, second half of the year as far as how they need to play. They did it last year in the playoffs. And in the second half of the season in the playoffs, they've been elite with just getting up and down the floor on dead balls, on scores, on misses, and they're just getting the rebound, and just getting up the floor. Offensively, they move the ball. They try to seek out a mismatch on a pick and roll, a switch, and they put their head down and attack it. They've got guys that attack the basket, and not just Halliburton, and it's not just Siakam. It's Nembhard, it's Naismith, it's McConnell, it's Toppin. Those guys just attack. And look at, like, and this is one thing Rick has always been good at, like inserting a guy in a game that you never really think of playing. Thomas Bryant, the Walker kid, and they just insert him in a game, and they know, look, this is what you need to do. Forget about this, and this. You need to do this and this. If not one thing, two things max, and you got to play hard, and that's it. With New York, taking care of the basketball. Like they very much were in this series coming into tonight. You have to take care of the basketball. You have to make shots. You got to get stops, and you got to get your ass back. And they couldn't take care of the basketball. Missing free throws. Just not finishing plays, and that was a big thing. And look, they've got Towns, who was really good. Last game he was elite, and he's been very good in the series. But look, he's missing free throws. He's doing wild shit offensively, over dribbling. Look, he killed him in the post last game. This game, again, Rick's going to make the adjustment where they doubled him early. He couldn't really get a great flow of things offensively. I think he had like 18 and 12. He was okay, but they took that away. Brunson was not himself. Like Brunson shows up 99% of the nights he shows up. This is the game where he didn't really rise his game to the occasion. Turnover after turnover. They took advantage of his lack of length and decision making when you take space away and you just put hands in his passing lanes and force him to make plays. And the thing about Indiana, it's funny, early in the year, how bad their defense was. Everybody was saying how bad their defense was. And what they did, the adjustment that I thought they made in the playoffs, I don't know if they made it late in the year. I didn't watch a lot of them during the regular season, late in the season. But they pick up 94 feet. If you want to play in today's game, I don't care if high school, college, pro, what have you, you pick up 94 feet. Nobody likes that shit. I don't care if it's an elite player or a garbage player or anybody in between. You pick up full court and you keep doing it and wearing guys down, you're going to get, you may not get it in the first quarter, but by the third and fourth quarter, if you do it right, you don't foul and you just pressure, it's going to be tough. And that's one thing, like Brunson and Bridges and all those guys, like they're good. They're a very good basketball team. But when you pressure them and you just keep pressuring them, they're going to make mistakes because they don't really have an elite playmaker on their team. And they just, that's what they did. And yeah, I mean,
the pressure thing is so spot on, Pro. Like I noticed, I think it was like middle of the third, no one wanted to bring the ball up for New York. Like no. Josh Hart, you even had Pascal Siakam was full court pressuring Josh Hart so much that Josh Hart was like, you thought he was going to fall over. Next possession, he got it to bring it up, looked at Siakam, threw it straight back to Brunson. Brunson's running on fumes, trying to like bully his way over half court. They couldn't even get the ball over half court sometimes. It was like really close. And then they get it over, and it's like, fuck, we've got 15 seconds left. What do we run? Throw it to Brunson. Dribble. Very clunky. Very clunky, and that's credit to Indiana. They got Siakam. They got Neesmith. They got Nembhard. They all guard. And then you got TJ McConnell, who's just as annoying. He comes on for his 20 minutes of energy burst, and he's scoring fadeaways and picking up full court. Like, they guard, man. They really guarded well this playoff series so far.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's not about doubling. It's not about like trapping, 48 minutes of, facing a press. All it is single coverage. But you just pressure everybody. You pressure, force a bad mistake, a lofting pass. And then, New York just made so many passes and pick and rolls that just went nowhere. They were just a one-way ticket to fucking nowhere. And Indiana took advantage of it, man. And that's how they'll probably play against Oklahoma City. They have to. Because, again, I think they have no superstar on the team. They got good players. So you can't play that isolation basketball. Look, I don't think New York's really got a superstar on their team. And they can't play isolation basketball. You got to play smash mouth when you need to defensively. Offensively, you got to move the ball, get your mismatch, draw two on the ball, live in the paint, try to dish to people either on a lob or dish out, for extra passes, for shots or straight line drives from the perimeter. And Indiana did it, and New York didn't. And look, credit for them, man. They deserve it. It's going to be. I don't think that it's going to go all that long. The finals. I think Oklahoma City has their number, but in my opinion, what they'll do is they're going to fight and they'll make it. They're going to make it tough, and it'll be an interesting series. But the way Indiana plays, man, it just. I think that's how you run your team because most teams don't have great players on it. So if you don't, that's the style you need to play. You play 94 feet, you pick up, you force people into mistakes. Offensively, you drive and kick, move the ball, get extra shots, and that's what you do. You wear teams down, you move the ball, you get to the rim, and you make plays for other people. And that's what you do, and you play tough. And, man, credit to Indiana.
It's hard to do,
man.
though. there's not many teams, Pro, that can. It's easy to say move the ball, get it through hands, side to side, but there's a lot of teams with max guys that just don't want to play that style. They'll say, yeah, we want to do that, and then they don't get a touch for 4 possessions, but the ball is moving well. And so maybe the argument is you don't need those max guys as much. You get in Indiana as a prime example, just get a bunch of good stars, second tier stars, and your Siakams and your Halliburtons, and they buy in, and they're not going to get in their feelings if they don't touch it for a couple of possessions. Whereas with some of these other teams, we've all been with guys in our careers that if they don't touch it 3 or 4 possessions, but everything's flowing nicely, they're still pissed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, fuck, and that's where Indiana's tough. It's a much harder scout, right? It's harder to scout Indiana, in my opinion, than it is to scout New York, because New York is like, stop Brunson, stop Towns, we're going to win the series, right? Indiana, we've seen some games where their main 2 guys haven't done too well, and they've still pulled out victories because the ball moves. They've got different guys on different nights that can get it going confidence-wise. Naismith was a prime example in game 1. Bombs all those threes, and they win it. They sneak a game out. He wouldn't have been on the scouting reporters like, at all costs, get the ball out of his hands in the 4th quarters. So I agree with you, Pro. I think it's, maybe this season, if it's a big if, I think OKC is going to win it as well. We'll get to that shortly. If Indiana win it, is that the new big 3? Let's get rid of max guys and get second tier stars and build a good team that can move the ball. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just being facetious, but it is a copycat league. Who knows?
But credit to Indiana's front office, about identifying those guys that are under the radar guys, affordable, because they don't have a ton of that. They didn't spend a ton of money on their stuff. I think salary wise, they're at 162. Next year they're 137. They got to deal with some deals. Maybe it's a little off, but identifying players. Look, they've got their Siakam and their Halliburton and Siakam. They got their 2 guys, and then they got Miles Turner under a good deal, and they've got Toppin's making $14 million. It's not that much. That's average salary these days. That's mid-level exception money. Naismith's under a good deal. All these guys. And they draft well, they develop well, and they've got all these other guys that, look, they play hard, they're over themselves as far as attitude-wise, and they just play. And they play hard, and nobody wants to play against those guys. They don't run any plays. They just have a system that they run, and that's great. I think that's how the Rick wants to play. They wants to play in flow. He wants he wants to space the floor. He wants to line you up. He wants to get a mismatch, and that's tough. Like you said, Bogues, you could say you want to play like that, but if you don't have the personnel to play like that, and that's, Indiana's got the personnel to play like that.
And their best players buy in. Their best players have bought into it. That's the key. So if your 2 best players on the roster, which is Siakam and Halliburton, they buy into that system of, hey, I might not get a touch for 4 possessions, but everyone's flowing. They buy in, you got a chance. Max players generally don't want to buy into that because it hurts their stats. I'm a max guy. I need to get my 20 and 10, whatever it is. So credit to them. Just to circle off this series, Brunson averaged 30 for the series, 50% from the field. Where I think the issue was with him, 5.7 assists to 4 turnovers. That needed to be 8 assists to 2 turnovers. They probably are better control of the series. Towns, 25 and 12. So big numbers, 50% from the field, 36 from 3. Anunoby was 17.5 a night, Bridges with 15.5, the rest were in single digits. And then you go to Indiana, much more balanced, 24.8 for Siakam. Halliburton with 21 and 10 a night. His 10.5 assists were to 1.7 turnovers pro. Absolutely crazy numbers there with 6 rebounds. Naismith with 13.2 and 13 a night from Turner, and then very balanced below that. Numerous guys with 9 points and 8 points a game.
And hats off to Mitchell, the way he played. He was really good. Hold on, I might have the wrong name on there.
Matherin?
No.
Nembhard?
Why'd I miss this one up?
McConnell?
And I don't even want you to edit this
Toppin?
one out.
Bryant?
My fault. Mitchell Robinson. I did the first name instead of last name. Yeah. Hey, look.
Robinson Mitchell?
My 30 seconds right there was like the Knicks' third quarter. That was completely fucked up and illegible, by the way. But anyways, Mitchell Robinson played great this series. I mean, how many rebounds did he come up with? Now, he didn't make his free throws. Offensively, he's he is
Love
what he
guy,
is. But
yeah.
like, how many offensive rebounds did he come up with? Like, as much as look, they lost and all that stuff. If there was a bright spot in the series besides Brunson's 30, that guy kept him in games because as much as Towns did for them. Offensively, defensively, this guy really disrupted things. He could actually play the ball, play up to the ball on pick and rolls. He didn't have to play in drop. And then the guy just protected the rim, lob threat after lob threat. He did play well. So he was fun to watch. Besides Brunson, there wasn't really a ton. I'll tell you what, OG played well going to the basket, and McBride made a lot of shots during the series. It's just, they just didn't have enough. So what would you do, Bogues, if you're the Knicks? Like, what do you
Tibbs
do
has just got to go deeper into his bench throughout the regular season. I think he needs to instill some confidence in those guys earlier in the season or earlier in the playoffs because it's going to rear its ugly head eventually. They didn't really have any bad injuries. I mean, Towns, by all reports, was a bit banged up. Brunson as well. But I think if you would have had, Campaign was a strange one, like didn't play it, played a little bit and then disappeared out of the rotation. Wright, who hadn't sniffed the floor. Shamet hadn't sniffed the floor. McBride was up and down. Play those guys, give them their 10, 12, whatever it is, early in playoff series strategically when you can, so they feel like they're in the flow. I think that's what hurt them. Once it got deep into the playoffs, players are fatigued. Their bench was alarmingly poor besides Robinson, compared to Indiana's. So looking at their cap, I don't know. I think this is the roster they're going to have for at least a year or two. I don't think they can do too much. Towns is contracted till 28 or 27 with a player option. OG is the same. He's contracted to 28, 29 with a player option. Brunson the same year. So they're all there. Bridges has one more year on his deal next season at $25 million. Maybe he's a trade bait guy at the deadline. Josh Hart's contracted till 27, 28. Mitchell Robinson's expiring after next season, but good value at $13 million. They do have a little bit of room on the role players, but it's like, who do you get? McBride's there for another 2 years. Campaign comes off the books. DeLon Wright comes off the books. Achua comes off the books. Shamet comes off the books. So you got some room there, but they're all only making, all those guys that I've just mentioned, they were, Achua was on $6 million, Payne's on $3 million, Wright's on $3 million, Shamet's on 1.6, the vet minimum. You got Huck Porty sitting there backing up. Rob can play maybe into a Robinson role eventually, I think, in the NBA. Don't know who they're going to get that can really come and help. They're already up there on luxury tax and with their salary. So I think this is the roster we're going to see. Bridges is probably the one that you could probably do something with as an expiring and get back maybe him and a throw-in, and you get back two better role players that can fill a role. That's probably it in my opinion. I don't think you can move. You're not moving Towns, OG, or Brunson. Hart's kind of locked into where he is. Robinson might be valued by some teams. He might be another guy, but I don't see them moving him because I think they see how valuable he is. That's it. I don't know what else they can do, Pro, but I think they're rolling the dice with this team for another year or two. If this doesn't get them to another conference finals or finals in a year or two, then the alarm bells start ringing on. Is it Towns or Brunson to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think Towns with first of all, with their philosophy on how they do things, like with a short bench, I don't mind it. In some ways, it's good as far as having a short bench with keeping your guys going. You're not resting guys. I mean, they got some unlucky stuff during the playoffs last year with injuries, but I really do think that they didn't have many injuries. They were very healthy this year. But I do agree with you with the role players. On one end, they didn't play. They came in a little rusty, but I'll tell you what, the last couple of games, they were pretty effective. Wright can't make a shot, but but I thought that they played effective with, Shamet made shots. He played really well defensively, but they need to definitely, throughout the season and playoffs, they got to play a couple more guys. And you don't have to play them a lot, but I don't think this should be if you have Shamet and you've got Wright and you've got Payne, right? There can't be 3 weeks where those guys don't play.
That's what I mean.
They got to play.
It's ridiculous.
Every 10, 12 days, throw them in. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and a blowout. You're going to blow out plenty of teams. You're going to get blown out plenty of times.
Even in a close game,
how the NBA is.
Buy them some spot minutes. Even in a close game, it's all good going out there in a blowout. But if you want your guys to be ready in a tight playoff series where you're going to need them at some point with foul trouble and injuries, You can't just throw him in at garbage time. You got to throw him in sometimes. Maybe you give him a 2 minute. Brunson gets his second foul, and you throw him in for 2 or 3 minutes. I think Rick was good at that.
Yeah.
Rick was good at putting guys
Very
in,
good at
which was kind of annoying at times because he had his set rotation. So Rick would be like, if I started and I was coming out to the 6 minute mark in the first quarter, right, and I got 2 fouls, but it was the 9 minute mark. There was 3 minutes there of buffer. He'd put in like the 13th guy to cover those 3 minutes till the guy that's supposed to come in at the 6 minute mark for me comes in. So then, like, I remember what's the crazy dude's name that we had on our roster?
How many of those?
Back up big.
Salah.
Salah, so Salah would, he'd be like, Mejri would be like DNP Doghouse, and then someone would be in foul trouble, would be like Salah, and he'd be like, me? He's like, you're in for 3 minutes to buy some spot
Get
minutes.
5 blocks, 2 rebounds.
Yeah, he'd be active, but and a tech. But that's what Thibs needs to do. He needs to give those guys some actual legitimate minutes so they feel part of the thing, and I think that's been the one knock on the way he's coached. But I think it's the opposite. I think you tighten your rotation a little bit as the playoffs get going. He does it the opposite. It's like it's tight all through the regular season, tight in the first round, then by second, third round, he's forced to go deeper, and you're like, fuck, these guys they haven't touched Spalding on an NBA court in legit minutes for 4 months, and now you're expecting them to be at the biggest stage in a conference finals to be effective. It's a pretty tough ask.
Yeah, without question. In their roster, the way it's constructed, look, Brunson's going to stay there. He's, like I said, I think outside of Ewing, and maybe Frazier and borderline Willis Reed, you might say that he's a top 5 Knick of all time. Just because he carries them. He's their best player for the last couple of years. The numbers he puts up, just sort of the way he plays. He's great, and I think they're going to keep him. Karl Anthony Towns, you can't trade. Look, they had it took Minnesota that long to get Towns off their books, and then it took them that long to get Randall off their books. So I don't think anyone's really calling, especially with $53 million, $57, and a player option at $61. I don't think anybody's lining up to take that onto their books. OG's tradable. You gave up a lot of assets to get Mikal Bridges, so in the trade for him. So it's interesting what they can and can't do. I like Mitchell Robinson for them. Look, they're gonna have they'll have a few minimum guys they sign in July, and I'm sure they'll probably there's a move in there that we're not seeing that they could probably make. They could they could bring in somebody else, but it's just tough. It's tough, especially with their bigs, because Towns is so good offensively at times, and then defensively, Mitchell Robinson's so good. Towns ain't much of a defender, and Mitchell Robinson doesn't give you much offensively. But they're both really good at what they do, in their role. But it'll be interesting. I like the way Tibbs does it. I think that every coach needs to sort of look at themselves in the mirror at the end of a year and say, what can I do a little bit better? Especially with all the media attention on the not playing enough of their role guys. So hopefully he opens that up. Gets another guy or two. Some minutes here and there. And so now you're in the playoffs, like we've been talking about. Now those guys are a little bit more fresh and a little bit more in, and they've knocked a lot more rust off themselves.
Yeah, and don't forget, most people didn't have them picked to go through to the conference finals anyway, so they have overexceeded somewhat, but obviously Boston being hurt and whatnot. All right, Indy OKC Pro, let's call it now. It's getting, what's your number? Who you got? You got OKC?
I got OKC in 5.
In 5? I'll give Indy a bit more credit. I think Indy, I've picked against Indy. I think I picked against them every series since the first round. So I'm still not going to pick them, but I'll give them 2 games, 4-2 for OKC. I think Indiana's so hot cold they could win a game by 15-20 with the way they move the ball and push it. But both these teams, what I like is they play a high pace and they force turnovers. So it's kind of like 2 meteors colliding in a way. I think OKC is probably a little bit. You'd probably say they're a little bit deeper, even though Indiana's pretty deep. But it's going to be. I think there's going to be players in this series step up that we're not talking about today, and that's going to be there's going to be a TJ McConnell game if Indiana steal a win where he has 18 and 5 and just knocks down big shots. Likewise with Caruso, who's going to hit 3 threes in a game. I think this is a prime series. You kind of know who's who in this series. There's going to be a role player that's not supposed to hit 20 is going to hit 20 in 1 or 2 of these games. It's going to turn the series, I think. But I think OKC 4-2. I don't think anyone gives Indiana a chance in this series, unfortunately. But Rick and coach were the best of them, and you never know. Momentum's a beautiful thing. One injury for either team, OKC loses SGA for a game or two with an ankle or something like that. Not wishing that upon anyone, but these things happen. Could turn on its head. But OKC like for like right now, 4-2 pro.
Bogues, who covers Chet Holmgren for Indiana? Because the way he could take guys off the dribble, you put Siakam on him, you think?
Has to be, but you got to be careful. You don't want Siakam to get in foul trouble, right? So that's where it becomes very, very interesting. There's a lot of cross matches in this series. Who gets to start on SGA? Will it be OG? Do they hide Tyrese off, or does Tyrese start on him? And then they go to OG and mix it up a little bit. There's a lot of shenanigans in this series. There's a lot of cross matches that you can implement.
OG? Which one?
Sorry, did I say OG? Yeah, no, wrong team.
Oh, see, now you got my disease.
Yeah, I did.
You got my disease.
Sorry, not OG. Who was I thinking of?
You mean Nemhard?
Nemhard. Nemhard was I was thinking of. Nemhard, you can maybe factor him with Halliburton, because Halliburton's not an awful defender and he's long, right? But you also don't want him in foul trouble and wear him down. So you got all that. McConnell will get a stint as well, but I just love the way they refereed this series. By the way, which I forgot to mention, Indiana versus New York. They just weren't calling the flailing shit, and some of them were fouls. Like I think Karl Anthony Towns, he got hit for a couple of and ones, and they're just like, we're not calling just because you fell over, and it was probably a foul.
Yeah,
they were just going, and at both ends, I like that. So if they continue that, and you can keep SGA off the line. I know it's been overspoken about SGA foul baiting, but he's good at what he does, and the rule is the rule, and manipulates it. Yes, but it's a foul. If they can keep SGA to under 10 free throws a night, they can be in this series. But yeah, I just think OKC is going to be too deep over the course of a series, and the Chet Holmgren thing is going to be interesting to see who he then guards at the other end too, because now you've got, you probably got Chet Holmgren, where I thought they were effective against their last two series, especially against traditional bigs at the 5, is they could have Chet at the 4 and be that roaming defender at the basket, right, and come and block shots and contest shots and be behind Hardelstein or one of their bigs, right? So it made a huge difference with the way everything was going, especially in that Denver series. A lot of times you'd see, Hardelstein doing all the hard yards against Jokic and physicality, and then behind he's got Chet at the basket, at times. So I like it. There's going to be a lot of cross matches. We're going to see some funky stuff, but I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully it goes 6 or 7 for the sake of basketball. But I think 6 is the max, pro. So we'll watch that intently. All right, moving on to some useful or useless, pro. Games in NBA history with 15 assists and 0 turnovers, pro. Top 5, who would you have off the top of your head? 15 assists with 0 turnovers in NBA history.
In a game, player in a game?
Yeah.
So
the leader,
have to say Halliburton, because he did.
Who?
Did he do it the other night? Did Halliburton do it the other night, or is it a team or a game or a player?
No. How many times it's been done? So there's the leader. Is 14. Second is 13. Third 11, and then there's 2 players with 7 over the course of their career having 15 assists with 0 turnovers. Can you name the 5?
Oh man.
You got one right. So he's in there.
Yeah. Tyrese.
He's third
Rondo?
with 11. No Rondo.
Stockton's
number 1 at 14.
He's ridiculous. Magic.
No.
Chris Paul
second with 13. Tyrese is third with 11. There's 2 more. One of them you'll never get. The other one you might get.
One of them I won't get. The guy that I won't get, when did he play?
He played in the 90s. And the other one's a multiple-time MVP.
Multiple-time. Jokic?
No.
Played in the 90s. Yeah, I don't know.
All right, fourth is Steve Nash with 7. Fifth is Muggsy Bogues with 7. That's the one you would not have got. But get this.
I wouldn't have guessed Muggsy.
This. So John Stockton, he's at 14. He played a 19-year career. Chris Paul's in his 20th season. He's got 13. Steve Nash, 18-year career for his 7. Muggsy Bogues, 14-year career for his 7. Halliburton in his 5th season has 11. So he's going to be the leader. He's 3 away from number 1, and he's only played 5 seasons. So amazing number. Hard to do. Useful, useless.
Oh, it's useful, man. That's a nice little number right there.
Yeah, I agree.
Now it's Trent, right? Trent, you came up with that?
No, I found that one. Oh, yeah, actually, he did.
found that
No,
one?
yeah,
I
he
thought
posted
it-
it. He posted in the group chat, I think, right?
Yeah, I might have shared that one, but I'm
You did
not
actually.
taking credit.
I screenshot it. No, you can take credit. I couldn't remember where I screenshot it from, but now that Pro mentioned that, I would have thrown it on the bus. Credit for Trent. All right, next two kind of coincide, but Game 5 is the least watched non-COVID Western Conference final since 2013. That refers to OKC, Minnesota. The least watched Western Conference final since 2013. But Thursday night Pacers Knicks game, where the Knicks won, averaged 6.7 million viewers. The most watched Eastern Conference final Game 5 since 2018. Useful, useless, Pro.
Useful, because I'd rather watch a herd of goats jump off a fucking cliff than watch that fucking Minnesota game. So, yeah, I would say that's completely useful.
But I'd assume people didn't even switch it on. They're just like, so big disparity. I know we get some rating stuff that's always negative, but on the positive, that Knicks Pacers game. Now, what's our predictions here? Do you think Indiana versus OKC lowest viewership in the last decade for an NBA Finals, Pro?
I don't know. It's
Besides
a good
COVID?
point.
Besides COVID?
I think everybody. I think people want to see Oklahoma City and what they're going to do, and I think they're so dominant during the year. They want to see it, and then people who picked up this series on New York and Indiana want to see this Indiana. Now, look, they're low market. They don't have a great player to really watch like that. So I don't know, Bogues. I'm not good at ratings. I'm as bad as ratings as I am picking
I'm
games.
gonna go lowest in the last decade, excluding COVID. No New York, no big market, no LA on the other side of things in the West. I think it's going to be a good series. I think you lose so many viewers when there's not a big market involved. You know, if an LA team's in, there's going to be LA. California's a big state, obviously. New York's a big state. You lose those two. Boston as well, Massachusetts, right? But I just don't see it. So we'll see. We'll watch that space. All right, Eastern Conference guards with double-digit, so that's more than 10, 30-point games in a playoff run in their careers. There's four of them, all time. Eastern Conference guards with double-digit 30-point-plus games in a playoff run in a single season. 4 of them. Can you name them?
Michael Jordan.
1.
Eastern Conference guards.
So it has to be, obviously, I'll give you a tip, Pro. Pick a guard that you know has been to the conference finals or finals at the very least, because it just gives you a better feel of games, range of games, should I say.
You got Knicks, 30 point. I mean, all of them done within the last 10 or 12 or 20 years, or you got some in the 60s?
Well, Jordan, besides Jordan, yes, all after 2000.
Okay, so Eastern Conference guards. Give me a second here. Hold on, let me just look at the Eastern Conference teams here. Okay, so Indiana, no. Miami Heat. Give me a second, Bogues. I'll get Penny Hardaway?
No.
Give me a few more guesses here. Has to be in the it has to be in the conference finals. Boston. You don't count Tatum as a guard, do you?
Oh, he's not on there, so no.
Yeah.
Unless he's counted as a forward, but yeah.
Yeah. Bogues, I'm just going to say fuck it. I don't know. Go ahead. What do you got? Iverson.
Yeah, 2. Beautiful. So you're getting there.
All right, hold on. You got Iverson.
One of them was on a team you mentioned out loud.
What's up?
One of them was on a team you just mentioned out loud as you were reading through the teams.
Oh shit. 30-point fucking Cleveland.
No, we're dying to slow down.
Isaiah Thomas?
Which one?
Oh shit. Both.
No.
Celtics.
It was a trick question. No, neither.
You fucking asshole.
Dwayne Wade.
You fucking asshole.
Dwayne Wade
okay.
and Jalen Brunson. That's it. That's the list. 4 guys. So useful, useless.
That's useful, man. That's a pretty good stat.
Yeah. 4 guys to only ever have more than 10 or more 30-point games in a playoff run. Fact or fake news, Pro? What do you got?
Bogues, a lot of talk about Halliburton over this series about being a superstar. So like people like There's a big crowd that says he is a superstar, big crowd that says he's not a superstar. And so fact or fake news, 2 parts. Well, one question, and then I want you to discuss it. Tyrese Halliburton is a superstar, and if he is or he isn't, in your opinion, give me your definition of what you really think a superstar is, as far as maybe the players in the league right now that are superstars, or just in general what you think a superstar is. So the question is, Tyrese Halliburton is a superstar. Fact or fake news?
I'm going to go fact on this. I think he is. I think it's a skill to be able to play a role at times and get off the ball. And I think that's a skill that a lot of max players don't have for whatever reason. And I just think he plays basketball the right way. And is he, when you look at traditional superstars, windmill dunk, 40-point games, no, but you look at his assist numbers, that's superstar territory. Like his assist numbers, his assist to turnover ratio. So Chris Paul's a superstar in his prime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same assist to turnover ratio, if not better, right? And he can score it, the number of, 25 plus, the 18 and 1, 19 and 1, whatever they were during the regular season. I just don't think he's as flashy on the court as he's not an ISO guy where he's going to back you down or cross you over. He just plays within the system, and I think his underrated skill is that he's happy to play off the ball at times. So I have him as a superstar. I just don't think the tag for superstar should be strictly towards, a Kawhi Leonard or a Steph Curry guy that can just get his own bucket. I think if you're factoring superstar to that, where you're like, can he get you a bucket with 2 minutes on the line? Then he's not a superstar. If that's your protocol for being a superstar, I just think he is, in the scheme of things with the way he plays basketball, I'll probably have him at top 20 in the league, top 20 probably. Now after this finals run, probably scratching top 15. I would have him as a superstar, yes.
Yeah, I say fake news only because Bogues, like in the whole NBA, there's only a limited number of those guys. There's a lot of great players. There's a lot of all-stars. There's a lot of, there's 24 all-stars. There's a lot of really good players, even players outside the all-star realm. But the difference between a really, really good player and a superstar, to me, sometimes you could play yourself into that role as a superstar. I don't think he's there yet. Like to me, Doncic, Jokic, SGA, Victor, Durant, Giannis, Steph, Tatum, superstars. Now the other guy that's sort of the 3 guys that are sort of, the one guy I think is in, but maybe you could say he's not in yet, is Anthony Edwards. I would say he's in. Then the other, Embiid's 2 injured, Kawhi Leonard 2 injured. I think they're off the superstar train for, either the rest of their careers or for the just the meantime. Now, the 3 guys that I think there are sort of getting to that superstar status, the 2 guys on top of that list. Now, Booker's on that list of like superstar, not superstar, and I think Brunson and Halliburton are the 2 guys tops of that list.
Knocking on the door.
And then Tyrese Maxey is another guy that's sort of playing himself into it, but I don't think he's there yet. But I just think that there is a separation, and he's had a great playoff run. He's going to the finals. That's all good things that are going to play himself into a superstar. I just don't think he's there yet. Although, like I said, I don't really give a fuck if people say he's a superstar or not. Like, I'm not really pounding the fucking desk about it. But I don't think he's there. But I think he's right on the cusp of it, in my opinion.
Remember, Pro, last season, he was top 5, if not top 8 in MVP voting, wasn't he? Somewhere around there?
Not sure.
2 seasons
Trent?
All right, let me ask you this then, Pro. So you've got Edwards, you've got Tatum above him, you've got them as your superstars, right? Okay.
Yep.
You put Anthony Edwards and the Pacers, are they in the finals today?
No, not the way he plays versus
exactly.
not the way they play.
That's my point. So it's like, that's where I argue, I think it's a skill of a star to play selfless basketball like that, where he's not worried about, shit, I'm the max guy, I need to at least get my 20. There's a number of guys on that list. I would argue you plug them into Indiana for Halliburton right now, they're not in the NBA Finals. There's a number of them.
The way they need to play,
exactly.
The way that Indiana needed to play, he's probably the best guy on that list to play that way. Yet, I mean, there is certain things in a superstar. Can you carry a team? And at times during the season, he couldn't hit water if he fell out of a fucking boat.
Yeah.
Like they're out there. He does struggle a lot. He is up and down. But then again, when he's on, I mean, he's really fucking good. But for me, a superstar, those qualities are great. Getting off the ball, playing the way he plays, it's outstanding. But as a superstar, I really feel as though you need to carry a team, and you don't do it alone. Nobody does. But you got to carry a team on top of being like being selfless and all that's great. But you do need to like bring it every night over a course of a season. And not everybody brings it every night. I get it. But like, I just think there is a criteria, and there's that aggressive type of player that I think that those guys, those guys have that. Maybe it's just something I'm looking for out of him, being just a little bit different. But you're right. You put those guys on Indiana, they're not in the finals. And I think that like the ISO guy, the alpha dog on that team is probably Siakam more than Halliburton. But Halliburton brings a level of passing the ball, shot making at times, things that he can do that is special. I think when the game gets ugly and you need a guy to put his head down and get, I wouldn't do Halliburton. I would probably give the ball to Siakam more. But yeah, I don't know, man. Everybody's got a different definition of what a superstar is. And I don't know if there's a right one. I think everybody's sort of right in their own way. But, it is tough. But I think he's really close. I think Brunson's close. I think he's close. And I think Maxi's sort of close. And then like I said, I got, Kyrie, those guys, we could mention a million guys. But, there are guys that are playing themselves into it. Like I think Chet Holmgren's going to be there in about 4 or 5 years. If not closer. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is sort of like, he's sort of on the bottom of that list I mentioned. I don't think Jalen Williams is a superstar, but I think he's really fucking good. Anthony Davis, I guess we could talk, but not healthy enough. I don't know. We could talk all day about it, but I just wanted to see what you thought about your thought processes. Trent, do you think he's a superstar or no?
I think there's a very select few guys that you could consider a superstar. Like I'm talking max 5 to probably 8 guys that are bona fide superstars. Sorry, I think anyone under that would be considered a star. So I think in that category, you have your Giannis, you have your Luka, you have your Steph, you have your Jokic, you have your Shea, and then the list starts getting pretty thin after that.
I agree with. I agree with.
Yeah.
Top 5, top 6. No, don't have him there.
Yeah.
But once you start comparing him to Tatum, Edwards, these guys, and then I just think of plug them into, even if you got a Tatum or someone like that and plug them into Indiana to play the style Tatum wants to be successful, they're not going to make the finals, in my opinion. That's how I see it. So it's a good question though, and I think. I don't think there's a right answer to it at the moment. I think as far as top 5, top 6, no, he's not there. That's why I said I think I've got him probably top 20, somewhere around that realm at the moment.
I think by himself, not a superstar. I think the way you put it, like the way Indiana got to the finals, you plug him in versus those other guys. Maybe the only guy that you could probably plug in my opinion, on that team that he could do that is Steph. As far as like being on the ball, off the ball, passing the ball, like doing the things he needs to do. But I agree with Trent where I think it's only a select, and that's why people throw that shit around too much, Bogues.
Way too much.
You hear it in the media all the time, mostly out of the ex-players that are on the ESPN, broadcasts and stuff. People throw superstar out a lot. And it's so fucking hard to be a superstar in this league. How good Brunson is, I think, like I said, I think he's a top 5 Knick of all time when it's all said and done, when his career is over, if he stays with the Knicks for a while longer. And I don't think he's a superstar yet. But, like, you got to play yourself into that. And I think there's only a select number of guys that you could really say is a bona fide superstar in the NBA. Like Trent said, there's a stars that could be 9-time All-Star, but superstar, complete different definition of that, in my opinion. But that's why, like, when people say best players of all time, I don't give a fuck unless they say if they say it's like fucking, I don't know, if they say it's like fucking, best player of all time, CJ McCollum, I'm gonna have a fucking argument about that. But mostly if you say it's Michael Jordan or if it's like Jordan, LeBron, Jerry West, whoever the fuck you're gonna say, I'm like, all right, whatever, like, that's what you think, that's cool. But
I agree.
It's hard to be wrong in these conversations,
Yep, I agree. All right, man. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Enjoy the time in Dallas and adios. Oh, by the way, Montrezl Harrell re-signed in the NBL, so you at least know one player now.
I know one guy. Oh, well, hopefully he'll make it past January. I appreciate that, though.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you next week.
See you, bro.
Later.
All right, moving on to some NBL news. Adelaide 36ers, Trent, have found another bag of cash somewhere. Montrezl Harrell is returning. I mean, we spoke about it last week. You've got Cotton, who Olgun has just said is the highest paid player in NBL history. So I think it sits between 1.2 to 1.5, if I'm guessing, man, Australian. You've got Harrell probably on 6 to 8, in my opinion, if I'm guessing. That then is put you to 1.8 at minimum. For those playing at home, the NBL salary cap is $2 million. You then have Isaac Humphries, who's going to be a marquee, so that hits at 250 max. They're paying you more, obviously. DJ's at a similar number. I think he's at 3 to 4, somewhere around there. That'll hit the second marquee level, which is, I think, 300. Flynn Cameron, I know is on a decent wicket because we were negotiating with him at one point. They're well over 2 with 5 players essentially. So they have to try to build their bench up, but they're gonna feel quite a. If the numbers come out in this season and they're only 100K over the cap, I've got pots and pans and I'm making all kinds of noise because they got to be close to the threes by the time this is all said and done.
It's super interesting. I'm very eager to see how this even works. I think adding Harrell to this lineup makes 0 sense in my opinion. I think with the salary and everything aside, there's obviously like some help coming from somewhere in terms of the money. But in terms of the actual basketball product and seeing this team successfully make a finals run with the talent they got, like, I wouldn't be surprised if these guys are fighting for 5th, 6th towards the end of the season. I understand what Bryce does as a player and the talent they have on this roster, but they are not going to have a lick of depth on that bench. There's not going to be anyone that can kind of come in and make any kind of difference with the money they have available, unless they somehow pull even more money out of somewhere. But like, I just think this decision to bring Harrell back is not a great one, and I just don't think Adelaide are going to be as competitive or the super team everyone's making them out to be. I think this is going to set them up for another unfortunate 5th or 6th spot.
Yeah, look, I think it'll be tough as far as talent goes, and they'll win games on talent alone. I assume Flynn's going to be the point guard on that roster, and they'll have, he'll be the 3 defensively, but he'll probably be the point, which he played a lot in college.
Yep.
Having DJ and Bryce as the 2-3 hybrids on the wings. But yeah, you would have thought they would have went with more of a defensive feel for that last starting spot. They don't have the best defensive lineup, but Wells has done some interesting stuff defensively at times during the season when he had his healthy roster. Talent-wise, they're threatening, but yeah, does it all? The thing with them is, does it all work with one basketball? That's going to be the issue. Bryce, historically, I feel like he's his most successful when he has a very high usage. I think if he's a low usage guy, he can have some bad shooting numbers at times. And the reason why Perth, and he was so good in Perth, was if he started a game 2 for 10 in the first half, he was still getting 10 or 15 shots the next half, and he would work his way into having a 30-point night or a 25-point night, and might it be 10 for 25, but he'd get it going eventually. With this roster, if he starts poorly, you might start seeing DJ why are we still going to him? Let me get some. Trez hasn't had a touch for a while. Humphries, who does struggle with not getting touches at times. Wells is gonna, there's coaching, but then he's gonna have to be a psychologist for most of that season and make sure guys are happy, and that's going to be the toughest challenge for him in that roster. If they get it right, they could win a championship. But I think that seesaw can go either way. Like, to your point, they could easily be a 5-6 seed, right? But if everything's functioning and it's honeymoon period, they could win a lot of games. But the basketball, there's only one of them on the floor at the time. There's only 40 minutes for all those guys to fit in with a bench. It's interesting. I thought they would have went more defensive lineup, but they're going to be a 100-point a night team on paper. Can they do a good job of keeping teams under that 100 to win games is going to be the question, and they'll be fun to watch. At least Adelaide's trying to really open that wallet and go bang, but we've seen that previously. But this is probably the best roster they've had and probably the history of their club. And the pressure's on them. The sniper rifles are on them, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all gets mixed about.
Yeah, by far the most talented, and like I think the cracks will show early if they do show. Like this thing will not, be a process-driven team where if things aren't going well, they're going to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel and work through a whole season together. I think if things aren't going well early, it's going to spell disaster for the club, and I think purely because their weaknesses as a team is defensively, and in the NBL, it's easier to scheme as a team defensively and hang your hat on a team defense, but it all comes back to effort. And if guys aren't happy, effort drops and those intangibles become, less tangible. So I just think if things aren't going well offensively, which they're supposed to when you look at this team on paper, I think it affects them on the defensive end where they're already so weak. So I think for them to go get Trez and not have a guy or a stopper on this team in the starting five, like they're pretty weak in their front three defensively. They're not going to be able to stop the high-level guards in the league. And then you've got Trez and Humphries. Humphries is a great defender, but you can't hang your hat on him blocking 3-4 shots every game or forcing stuff to the rim. So I think it's going to look great, and like you said, it's a great product, but I think if you're actually trying to win games and you're going up against these clubs like Melbourne, Sydney, potentially Perth, we'll see who goes where. I just don't see this working over the course of a 26-game season or whatever it is.
Well, it will be fun to watch. I think Cameron Flynn's probably going to get that unfortunate task of guarding the best guard, and then obviously having to facilitate the offense at the other end. So Rasmussen will find a nice role off the bench too. I thought he was decent in small clips for them. When you look at Perth, historically a Mitch Norton, Damian Martin type, Rasmussen, I think, can fill that role, like a grindy guard, not a great shooter, not a poor shooter, but can facilitate a little bit. I think he'll end up playing into some minutes. Yeah. But yeah, it will be interesting to see where all that goes. Alex Condon withdraws from the NBA draft, will return to Florida. So Florida's probably outbid any NBA contract he could have got by far. So he's decided to return. That's my guess, and why not? Good luck to the kid. From all reports, he teams had him as a late first, early second. So interesting to see him withdraw. But yeah, he's probably like second round contracts minimum. I'm getting 3 times as much at Florida. Deuces. So he's out of there. Cairns rumours, and there were some Patty Mills rumours floating about again. Chris Anstey posted that he thought Cairns was the way to go. Coincided that with ownership stakes. So then you put 2 and 2 together. People thought, maybe Patty's getting some ownership. He's going to go to Cairns. 2 separate things. I think the Cairns private ownership thing is close to being done from what I've heard. I don't think it involves Patty Mills. Secondly, I'm going to go back to what I said. You hear these Mills rumours. This is from someone, not from me, so don't take it personal, but from what I've heard, the Patty Mills quote, this is not me again, the diva demands that Patty requires to sign with an NBL team have been too much for all NBL teams. That's the word on the street, directly from someone who works in NBL media. The Kings obviously don't have any interest with rosters pretty close to being done, one more spot, but that's what I've heard. I don't know what they are. I don't know what the extent of those are. I don't know if it's involving ownership, too much money, travel for family, private planes, different hotels. Don't know, but they said that was the concern when dealing with, I guess, the management of Patty Mills. So that is kind of the scuttlebutt around the league.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Again, I think we've said multiple times it's hard to see Patty returning just because he's been pretty vocal previously about not wanting to come back and play in the NBL towards the end of his career. And I think if you know the standard of an NBA team or being a part of an NBA team, if he expects it to be similar or to be close coming back to the NBL, then there's just no way that's going to happen. So until there's some sacrifices to be made or, some conditions dropped a little bit, I think a Patty return is just the NBL media trying to drive up those likes and clicks to get engagement looking nice and good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if I'm a betting man, I would not be surprised if Patty ends up in San Antonio for a season, as his kind of vet min retirement send-off. They got Matt Nielsen there. They have a really good relationship in those two. So I would not be surprised. They do have a lot of that need filled for veteran leadership, though, with Harrison Barnes, Chris Paul, De'Aaron Fox there now. They've got a lot of guys that are playing that role already. Do they need another one? I don't know, but maybe it'd be a favour to him. He'll finish his career in kind of where his star started rising. So I don't see him coming back this season. But that's not to say I would love it. I think it's great. If he came back and signed with Perth tomorrow, like, shit, now I've got to deal with this guy in Perth. I've got to deal with Bryce in Adelaide. But that's what makes the league great. I definitely would love for him to sign in the NBL. I just don't, knowing what I know behind the scenes and what you hear, it just does not seem like a realistic pathway for him at the moment. Maybe we're a year away from it, who knows. But when you look at the journey that I myself took, Delhi took, of extending national team career, and I know the Boomers are very important to him, maybe he sees a light in a year or two and says, shit, like if I can get back to the NBL and dominate the NBL for a season or two at mid-30s, I'll still get another look in for 28 and get to my, I think, 6th Olympics, which would be an all-time record. That could be a motivation for him. I'm not sure. I don't speak to him on a regular basis to know, but that's kind of me thinking out loud. But hopefully he's back one day. But as of this season, I think it's very, very unlikely. And that would explain why Cairns hasn't hired a coach, by the way, or done anything with their roster. Is they're in the middle of a transition period with their ownership from a community-funded organisation to private ownership. It will be interesting to see what number they get. I don't think it's going to be a big, massive number because I think there is some debt in that club being community owned, but that would be why fans out there that are frustrated with Cairns Taipans not hiring a coach. It's very, very hard to, if you're in negotiations with this kind of stuff, I would assume the other party said, pause everything until we get this deal sorted out and we'll then handle it. Hopefully it's someone that knows NBL basketball, has some NBA background, can come in and revamp that Cairns Taipans roster. They do a great job of recruiting, in my opinion. For the budget they've had the last 10 years, they find gems all over the world, even Australian talent. So they can factor that in with a bit more of a wallet. Who knows? You could probably have a pretty powerful club up there in North Queensland.
Yeah, people don't, unless you're a long-time fan of the NBL, people don't realise how successful Cairns have been in the last 2 decades. Very historical club, multiple NBL finals. Haven't been able to get over that hump, but when you consider the restraints and the challenges they face as, like you said, a community-backed club, the fact that they have the results they have and have put the rosters they put together over the last couple of years says everything you need to know. My only fear with that is that if private ownership comes in and kind of derails their system they have in place or doesn't kind of lift it up and tries to come in and change and, reinvent the wheel, that they could do a similar thing that happened with the Bullets, where you just stagnate as a club for 15 years because there's no clear direction or no idea on what your identity is. So I just hope that this private ownership does come in and it allows Cairns to kind of splash more cash and be able to retain these guys that they're able to go find long term, but you just hope they don't kind of derail what has made Cairns successful over the last 2 decades.
It's a fair point. That's a fair point. I guess when you're bare budget, you really got to dot your I's, cross your T's, be really kind of focused in on everything, because you can't afford to make a 50k mistake like some clubs can. Yep. Now you probably can. Does that create some complacency? That's a very fair point. So we'll watch that space with Cairns. That's about it in the NBL stuff. I think Asia Cup is around the corner. That camp starts late next month. Other than that, NBL preseason announced for the Blitz is in Canberra for everyone. I think has that been announced publicly?
Yeah, that's public. Yep. That's public. Yep. They also announced a mid-season tournament that we haven't really touched on for next year, but I don't know what your opinion is around that.
It's 4 extra games. I believe it's midweek. It's it's interesting. It's interesting to say the least. Midweek games in the NBL are generally death for club owners, because you just can't get fans out there, especially in Sydney. Like, no one's coming to a 7:30 game on a Wednesday. So then we're running these games basically at a loss, forced by the league. It's not great. So it's done. It's been implemented. I don't think the tournament games have been great in the NBA. I think it's been kind of a laughing matter in the NBA for the most part. And I just don't think it's going to really make that much of a difference. But I'm optimistic. I hope things go well. The play-ins were one that I wasn't optimistic about, but that's brought some new life. But this one, I think it's, the gimmicky stuff just gets on my nerves a little bit. We try to really, you got Hoop Fest, and then you got this. You had the summer shootout last season, just like, holy shit, like we're throwing a lot of darts at a dartboard, none are really sticking. But let's hope it goes well and I'm wrong in 12 months' time, but not a huge fan of it, Trent.
Yeah, it's interesting. This one, it's like you can almost watch the NBA and see how it goes over there. And if it's not successful there, then the chances of it being successful in the NBL are pretty low. And like this is classic NBL. Anytime the NBA implements a new anything, it's like, let's copy and paste that immediately without any sort of research, any sort of anything. It's just like, we got to do what the best league in the world is doing. And I think the NBL, isn't built for a mid-season tournament as it is. I think there's already so much strain on these guys throughout a regular season. Them upping the games each season now, I know, is a strong talking point across the league in terms of guys don't want the games to get too much. So now you're adding a mid-season tournament. To your point, no one wants to watch basketball at 7:30 on a Wednesday. There's got to just
only
be
if the
purpose in
TV
these
outweighs
things.
the live product. That's the only argument they probably have. If you can get 2 or 3 actually regular TV numbers, because
Right.
Australian TV on a Wednesday, well, I don't watch public TV, but free to air, I assume it's maths and some other stupid reality show.
Well,
As a
like
sports fan, even if I didn't like basketball, let's say this was bowling, I'd watch bowling over maths. Oh, it's a live sport. Let me give it a crack. That's the only way it works, that TV product. But then the clubs are saying, great, TV product, make more money for league. What about us? We've got to turn our lights on and fire up a 20,000 seat stadium.
So you got to
Wednesday.
distribute that.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's where it becomes interesting. So that's the only argument they got is, does it bring viewership of people that are at home, long days work? There's no footy, there's no rugby league on, there's nothing on Wednesday nights. Maybe we get some fans accidentally just chucking on free to air and saying, "Oh, basketball game live, cool." I'll watch it.
If that's the reasoning behind the mid-season tournament, then inherently it's just no good. I just think that's the dumbest thing ever. If you're trying to get people to mindlessly just flick on the NBL, I mean, this thing has no history. That people aren't getting up for it. The players aren't going to care. So there's no incentive for people to want to watch this out of the gates, other than the fact that maths might be on and you might rather watch a basketball game other than maths. That's a huge worry in my opinion.
I agree. All right, we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. A couple more weeks left of the pod till it gets hung up on the shelf for a while. So tune in next week. We'll touch on probably, I think it's post game 1. I think we'll be floating. I think game 1 is on the 6th of June. So we'll see how that goes and catch everyone next week.